Do that. All right, 6.9. Our 11:30 a.m. public hearing, consideration of Planning Commission's recommendation of approval of a modification MMU 2201 to a tentative subdivision map SD 06-01 for Valley Oaks Land and Development Inc., location 18426 South Highway 29 and 18765 Hartman Road, Middletown, APNs 014-26051 and 014-26024. We have our Community Development Department, our Director here, Maria Turner.
Thank you. Maria Turner, Community Development Director. I have with me today Associate Planner Eric Porter, who will present the staff report. We also have representatives for the property owner available for questions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Board. Eric Porter, Associate Planner, Lake County. This request is limited to adding a lot into the approved Valley Oaks subdivision for purposes of access. Just to back up a bit, originally the plan was to connect to the roundabout with Hartman. Caltrans and the applicant were not able to come on the same page regarding the roundabout connection. And so they had to come up with an alternative to provide access to grocery outlet. Consequently, they constructed Oak Meadow Road, which connects to Hartman, as an alternative entrance into Valley Oaks commercial subdivision. The issue was APN 014-260-24, which contains the connector road, was not formally introduced into the border of the subdivision. So your action today would essentially legitimize that alternative access. One of the supervisors had a question about Arabian Lane, and I did talk to the developers about what their intention was, and they indicated that with Caltrans and with the county, assuming they're on board at a later date, Arabian Lane could turn into a right-out exit only without an entrance. There was some discussion about whether Arabian Lane is actually too close to the roundabout. And the other question that is still unanswered is when the roundabout itself will connect with the internal driveway, because that would provide essentially the main access into Valley Oaks commercial development. One thing I did want to point out, the applicant is requesting, this is on Exhibit 4B. Sorry, my glasses keep fogging up. The applicant's requesting the establishment only of Condition 3, which would negate the need for Conditions 4 and 5. Again, this is Exhibit 4B. The other part of this is that the dates need to be filled in, so we'll take care of that following the hearing. And on general condition number 2, the applicant asked to add for clarification a short phrase. So the applicant's requesting that it be changed to say, approval of this modification allows the inclusion of an access road easement on APN 014-260-24. So the additional words would be an access road easement on, and staff has no issue with that. The two conditions that they wanted to remove are general condition number 4 and number 5. Number 4 says development contemplated on any portion of APN 014-260-24 shall require a full amendment addendum to the FEIR for Valley Oaks, and all CEQA categories shall be evaluated for mitigation to any potential impacts that might occur or might result. Number 5 says any development contemplated development on any portion of APN 014-260-24 shall require a specific plan of development, parentheses, major use permit, in parentheses, and design review, in addition to potential amendment of the addendum to the FIR stated in number 4 above. Because this only applies to the modification, we're not too concerned about retaining conditions number 4 and 5. So to have those stricken to planning staff is acceptable. And that concludes my presentation, unless you have any questions.
Madam Chair, if I may, sorry. Since this is a public hearing, testimony, any sort
Swear
of
everybody
testimony,
in.
subject under oath.
Okay. Anyone? Yeah.
Okay. If you're gonna talk, can you swear in for me? Yeah, we should all swear in. Okay. With your right hand raised, do you solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Yes.
Thanks.
If there is one other thing, please, that just to point out, we had a typographical error in the executive summary where it refers to subsection 60.21 of the county code regarding the modification of permits. The correct citation is actually 60.33, not 60.21. Gets the same thing done, just a different number.
Thank you. Supervisor Spatier.
Thank you. I just wanted to ask a clarification question. If I read correctly, CEQA was done on the alternative entry point solely for the idea of grocery outlet, but CEQA has not been done on this idea of this temporary road being used for the, I have the exact number of units, but 300 plus potential units. CEQA has not been reviewed for traffic flow and things like that for the overall project, or was it simply for grocery outlet?
Well, there are two different actions that happened for Valley Oaks regarding CEQA. The primary was the environmental impact report, and that was actually part of the adopted subdivision or the approved tentative vesting subdivision that the board approved in 2018. That was accompanied by the environmental impact report, which was extensively vetted by a former director, Bob Massarelli, who had some concerns about some of the findings, but ultimately it got adopted by the county. So the FEIR, or the addendum that accompanied Valley Oaks, was intended pretty much exclusively for Valley Oaks, but that did take into consideration the alternative Oak Meadow access. As far as future development goes, I believe we will have to reevaluate CEQA at a later date if there are development plans for either the totality of the residential portion of it or, frankly, any aspect of the commercial part. However, we haven't evaluated it with this modification for future CEQA impacts. Okay. So I'm going to have the applicant and his consultant further address that aspect of it.
And if I may, before that, just to at least express my concern is I'm seeing people going, in my mind, I'm envisioning people going down Hartman, all of a sudden they're stopped with their blinkers to turn left and they can't go because there's traffic flowing out Hartman towards Highway 29. What does that traffic flow look like? How long before it hits that roundabout? All of those things, I'm not quite sure how the flow of traffic ends up working out with just a singular T intersection right there if it gets fully developed in the long run. In the short run, as it works now, works great. But when I see 300 plus homes built out and maybe there's no further connection to the roundabout, maybe Arabian Lane is not a possibility. I have concerns for that one as well, depending on how that will be built out. But just we're trying to take away access to Highway 29 and add more conducive traffic flows and decrease traffic congestions. The last thing I want to do is say yes to something that might recreate new traffic congestions elsewhere. Just at least wanted to express it.
Supervisor Green?
Yeah, thank you. These are just going to be process questions, but I'm looking at the minutes from June 8th, and I see that the Planning Commission approved the amended vesting tentative subdivision map, but it wasn't titled as today's item is titled, having to do with a modification. So in this item, I have MMU 22-01. I don't see that the Planning Commission heard a full MMU application. And although they did approve they recommended approval of the amended tentative subdivision map, I don't know that they went over proposed modifications to the conditions of approval, and I don't see any findings that the addendum to the final EIR be accepted. So can you, just so I know what the deliverables are, it seems to me that the MMU 22-01 application is sort of a bundle. But I want to make sure when we're voting to approve that bundle that it includes probably what's going to be Exhibit 3, the amended vested tentative map, the modified COAs, including the amendments proposed today, and the CEQA findings on the FEIR addendum. So I just want to make sure that the Planning Commission process lines up with what's before us today.
Thank you. Yes, the vesting tentative map was approved by the Planning Commission. They were able to do the approval, not just a recommendation for the board. So that's why that item didn't move forward for board action today. So what you have before you today is the modification. The vesting tentative map was included as an attachment just to help the board see where that road is going to be, where Oak Meadow Drive is. But the board need not take any action on the vesting tentative map.
Then follow up.
And Rick can jump up here and correct me if I'm if I'm mistaken.
Yeah. Finish your comment, Supervisor Green?
Well, I'm just looking. So then in the second recommended action, it suggested we approve the modification to the tentative vesting subdivision. So we're not approving the map. So again, I don't know what an MMU is, and I haven't seen an application, so I don't know what the deliverables are. So if we're not being asked to reapprove a tentative subdivision map that's already been approved by PC in its amended form, you know, what's the document we're being asked to approve?
Sure. Why don't you come up to the podium and introduce yourself?
Sorry, there's a lot of questions. I think I might
You
be
say
able
your
to
name for the record.
add some color. I'm Rick Tooker. I'm a planning consultant for the applicant who's here on Zoom, and our team is here in the room as well. I work for Farrell, LeBron, and Martell in Napa. Let me back up to then answer some of the questions that you've raised in a few minutes. In fact, I'd like to do if I could hand to the clerk as well. Those are the conditions that your staff has talked about in terms of just the cover page with the change, so I'll address that issue as well. This application contains really just two issues. The first issue is in 2018 when the board approved the subdivision map, the large tentative subdivision map. It included condition in it. That condition said that we were to come before you at some point in the future with a commercial phasing plan. The project on the upper parcel had a residential phasing plan, but the lower portion, the 29 portion, if you will, did not have a phasing plan. So we were asked to come back at some future point to do that. The second thing that and of course we're proposing that today. We have that plan that's embedded in the plans that you have and in the reporting. The second thing that was asked, it really came out of the 2020 decision that you saw as an appeal actually on the grocery outlet store. And at that time, Mr. Porter's correct, at the time there was an issue with the roundabout. The alternative access would be the Hartman connection to Oak Meadow, which is actually under construction and nearly ready to final. So those are the only two items that are before you for consideration. What the phasing does, going back to that portion of it, the commercial phasing plan that we presented to you, is it essentially starts with the grocery outlet store. It's built. It just happens to be on the entirety of the lower portion that fronts on its entirety to 29. What the proposal in the first phase would do is essentially put a parcel around grocery outlet so that can be transacted. And with that transaction, capital can then be used to start flowing into other subsequent phases, commercial and residential. And so there's a multi-phase commercial plan that really starts at the south and then runs the entirety of the length through to the north, that build out, including the housing site. The proposal to add the Hartman connection is strictly a road easement. It's not for the entirety of parcel 24. That's why CEQA wouldn't be required. If the entirety of 24 were to be included, instead of just the easement connection, the road connection, as a former community development director and planning director in a lot of different agencies, what the staff would have had to do is look at the potential for development of 24. But that's not proposed. There's no proposal to develop 24. Who knows if it'll be developed and by who in the future and what the development will be. But the analysis that occurred in 2020 for the road connection, the extension from Hartman to the grocery outlet, that was evaluated. The developer submitted at the time a W-Trans report that was fully vetted for what the change in the traffic flow would be without the roundabout, but instead at Hartman, and then how that would translate in the future with development with or without the roundabout. So that environmental was fully vetted in 2020. So back to the two parts, a commercial phasing plan and the connection of just the road easement. On the roads, the road connections that really are 3 points now, right? The Hartman connection to the grocery outlet and through the project, the roundabout and Arabian. As you know, there was a challenge between developer and Caltrans as to that fourth leg, I think it was the fourth leg of the roundabout, after the 2018 approval. That's working through a process, and we believe that we're at a point where there's going to be an agreement soon that would essentially open that up. It's my understanding, and I'm not a party to that, so I don't want to speak out of turn, but essentially it's always been my understanding that the roundabout has never really been the issue. It was always known to have that fourth connection. It's on the map. It was never commented by Caltrans at the time as being an issue. It only came up later. Real issue is the Arabian. Arabian potentially is too close to the roundabout. Caltrans often, in many projects that I've worked over, dozens in my career, Caltrans doesn't like connections to state highways that are often close to roundabouts, or for that matter, two connections that are close together. I'm virtually certain that's going to be resolved in the short term, so that, as you saw in the phasing plan that we presented to you, phases 1, the grocery outlet lot, Phase 2, 2 lots next to grocery outlet. Phase 3, just adjacent to those 3 lots, grocery outlet. Those don't need the roundabout. Once you start getting into Phase 4, Phase 5, then you'll need the roundabout. And we're virtually certain that that will be addressed by then. And to add to that point, this Board of Supervisors has the ability to, every time a final map is presented, to review that final map. To say, now's not the time because we have an issue. So I don't suspect that you'll have a problem with putting a parcel line around grocery outlet, or Phase 2 putting 2 lots next to grocery outlet, or even Phase 3 that's not anywhere needing to access the roundabout. I suspect that it'll come at a point later where you'll say, okay, now that needs to be resolved. That could be quite some time away. We'll be well settled before that. So hopefully that answers some of the questions that you had.
Just very quickly, when you say process, you mean litigation, right? There's litigation ongoing with Caltrans on this?
That's correct, and the process goes through a series of exercises to resolve litigation, and that's what I mean by I believe we're close to getting to a point where it's no longer an issue.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Supervisor Sabatier?
Appreciate the response. I couldn't find some of that information within the information provided to us, just because there's been so many iterations of this project to get to where we are today. Love the project. I think it's absolutely necessary. It's one of those long-term projects that we all want to see accomplished. So, but is there, just because you never know with Caltrans, I'd love to believe that everything will get worked out when it comes to, especially to the roundabout, because that is the most legitimate way to access this project, and I sure hope that's the way it goes. You were stating that, and I don't know if you meant specifically, but you were saying after phase 6, yeah, at that point, there might be an issue if there's no access to the roundabout. Is there a trigger to go back and review those things once they do reach a certain phase? I just want to make sure that that exists, just because I do have that concern, especially if it's still accessed through Hartman, that we would need to make sure that there's that, the traffic flow is taken care of if Caltrans doesn't want to play ball.
And Supervisor, let me perhaps respond, and staff may respond, piggyback off of that. So yes, there are triggers, and it's after phase 3, really, not phases 4, 5, and 6. The trigger is that there's detail in each phase as to what infrastructure supports the construction phase, and each one has an option. It says, if the roundabout isn't available, then it would be this. If the roundabout is available, then it connects up to it. Once you get to those later phases, we'd have to provide proof to the county that the traffic flow works for the project to actually receive a final map. We know it works with grocery outlet, we know it works with 2, and we know it works with 3. By the time you get to 4, the county staff would have to say, hey, you need to show us that this works from a traffic flow perspective. I neglected also to mention this. The trigger for phase 2 or traffic that generates from a future phase, presumably the next phase is 2, would require a left-hand turn stop sign or stop light, if I recall. Actually, it's a stop light. Stack lane. Stack lane? Left turn lane, so that you basically, there's more control over those folks coming out of, Hidden Valley. So it's those kind of stopgap measures that are in place to protect the county, but also to ensure that you're telling us what's responsible and required at each and every phase of a final map.
I appreciate the answer. That was my only concern, and that is alleviated with the response that I received.
Okay. We don't have anyone else sworn in, so we're not going to open up for public comment, or do we? Yes? Public comment? Okay. Anyone in the chambers for public comment? And I'm not seeing anyone in the Zoom room, so we'll bring it back to the board for action.
Get Mike with the question here.
Oh,
Supervisor
Supervisor Green?
Yeah, and I apologize. I just go back to the titling of this item. So if we are actually, as listed on the memo, considering the Planning Commission's recommendation of approval of MMU 22-01, and then I go back to the minutes, and all I saw was the approval of the amended vested subdivision map. But what is before us here today is more than a map. Is this titled correctly?
Go ahead, County Council.
I think I can provide, good morning, or afternoon. I think I could provide a little bit of clarity as to which rule applies here, and because I think you're kind of crossing between modifications under the ordinance and the use of the MMU modification title within CDD. So what's applied here is Article 60, Part 60.33, which is an application for an amendment. So when an applicant wants to change an already approved permit, what they do is they reapply for another permit with those changes in the permit. There's nothing within that code section that requires a planning commission review. So even if the planning commission is making a recommendation, the rule 60.33 here requires merely that the applicant reapply and go through the exact same process as the prior permit in front of the same board or decision maker that made the original permit decision. And in this case, that was your board. So that's why it has come to you instead of stopping at the Planning Commission. So as outlined by staff, what you're being asked to consider here are the amendments that the applicant is requesting be made to the permit that your board approved prior to this, if that helps.
Thank you. Okay.
So, question then. And I don't think you can do it on the fly, but you could say possibly it's de minimis. If it was titled, for example, Consideration of Modification MMU 22-01, and the rest of the title continue that, just striking the words of the Planning Commission's recommendation of approval, that title would be accurate, and then the recommended findings contained within the staff report. Everything else would be perfect.
I think actually the Planning Commission did approve, or did make that recommendation of approval, but maybe not at the same date as the vesting tentative map. So I have an email into staff right now, just checking that date. So we will clarify it.
Okay.
I'm ready to move forward. To me, it's semantics. I'm comfortable.
Ready for action?
Madam
Did you
Chair,
have one more thing, Lloyd?
I'm sorry.
Did you have something else?
Regarding the motions themselves.
Okay.
Because of what was discussed here, there's two separate motions, and your board may, for the first motion regarding the adoption of the FEIR addendum, move that the Board of Supervisors adopt the addendum to the final environmental impact report based on findings in the memorandum for MMU 22-01 dated November 7, 2023, and I would recommend adding the phrase, including the findings on page 7 of the staff report dated June 8, 2023, for further clarity, if staff is okay with that.
So moved.
Aren't there also amendments to changing the condition of approval?
Removing 4 and 5, is that the next one?
That would be on the next
Okay.
one.
Second.
We had a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And then for the second motion regarding the approval of the modification, in parentheses, MMU 22-01, move that the Board of Supervisors approve the modification, parentheses, MMU 22-01, as amended to tentative vesting subdivision for Valley Oaks, parentheses, SD 06-01, based on the findings and subject to the conditions in the staff memorandum dated November 7, 2023. And I would recommend adding, including the findings on pages 7 and 8 of the staff report dated June 8, 2023.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Madam Chair, just I wasn't certain from the way that was read whether that included as amended the conditions that the county staff supported.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. I didn't hear.
Okay, thank you so much.
He doesn't want to come back.